Welcome back, everybody, from a long hiatus to the Big Sky Now Football Podcast, where we have a lot to update you on that you might have missed. The NFL draft and CFL draft both happened in April, so we're here to highlight some of those things that you might have missed. We're going to jump right into it with the NFL draft. The first player taken off the board in the Big Sky Conference, who at least finished their career there, was Jackson Slater from Sacramento State. He went before Marcus Harris, who was a former DB for the Vandals. He was taken in the 6th, Slater taken in the 5th. Fritz, was it a shock that, or a surprise that these were the first two guys from the Big Sky to get drafted, or this kind of go as you expected?
Yeah, I think Slater was rated really highly, and so was Harris. So not a big shock. I think my biggest surprise is that when it was all said and done, Marcus Ware from MSU, who was really highly rated offensive lineman, didn't get picked and had to go the free agent route. But no, I thought Slater was going to get drafted, and I thought he was one of the better players to come out of the Big Sky. And yeah, I wasn't too surprised.
With Slater too, I almost feel like he had a knee injury there late in the season for Sac State that might have even hurt his chances of going even higher up in the draft at this point. I know he didn't give up a sack at all in his 9 games that he played this season. Pro Football Focus had him as the number 4 rated FCS guard coming out this class. So, and offensive lineman's a class where the FCS excels at. So it doesn't surprise me at all to see him go. Harris as well. I mean, All-American in his time at Idaho, and he played great this last season in a Power 5 school in Cal. So definitely had the talent to be up there, and teams are going to take a shot there in those late rounds with some of these guys.
Yeah, I feel like whenever we recorded the NFL draft preview, we kind of were in agreement that we thought Slater would be the first offensive lineman taken in the draft, and so that shook out exactly how we expected. But we are going to talk about Ware a little bit later on, but I do agree with you, Fritz, that was kind of a shock that he wasn't drafted, but he did end up on a team. So it could still work out for him. Moving on, after Slater and Harris were drafted, the Raiders went in and swooped up touchdown Tommy in the 6th. And then 2 picks later, they got Cam Miller, who they expect to keep as quarterback. They're talking about shifting Mellott to the slot receiver. How do you feel about this move for the Raiders taking Mellott? And we know how gifted he is athletically, but how do you think he'll make that transition, John, to going from a quarterback to being a slot receiver for the Raiders? And what do you think of drafting Miller right after that?
Yeah, I definitely found it funny that they've met up twice in the FCS National Championship game, and then they get drafted 2 picks apart from each other. So that was always a very, very funny moment for me. Looking at just what the roster looks like for the Raiders, I see 6 rookies on their roster this year at receiver. So Mellott's going to have a lot of competition. But we've had those comparisons to Julian Edelman, that quarterback to wide receiver kind of combo. He definitely fits the bill. He's athletic enough. He's got good hands. We've seen that coming out with the pro day and everything. So I definitely feel like he's got a shot to make the league. And if you look at some of the veterans on the team too, the only name that really stuck out to me was Jacoby Myers. So I see a lot of opportunity there for rookies to make this roster with the Raiders. And so the opportunity is definitely there for Mellott. He just kind of got to seize it and show his worth during the preseason. As for Cam Miller, looking at the roster again, I see 4 quarterbacks. I see Geno Smith, who they just acquired. I see Aiden O'Connell, who got a few starts this last year for the Raiders as well. And then they have a second-year player out of South Alabama, Carter Bradley. So I'm not too sure on him, but that opens up a chance, that third quarterback position, practice squad, making a 53-man roster might be a little difficult with O'Connell and Smith there. But Cam Miller definitely, he's kind of got to break through the stigma of North Dakota State quarterbacks, because Easton Stick, Trey Lance, not exactly the greatest in their time in the NFL, and Carson Wentz was good until he had that injury. So North Dakota State quarterbacks don't exactly have the best track record at all times when it comes to making it to the professional level. So there's definitely a lot to work against him, but I can see him definitely at least making the practice squad.
Yeah, and before we get your opinion on that, Fritz, too, it's a good thing that you mentioned all the rookie wide receivers that the Raiders have. And then you mentioned the one stable guy they have is Jacoby Myers, who, just as would happen to be, was also a former quarterback. So they have proof on the roster of what it takes to make that transition. So we're hoping Tommy the best. But Fritz, what are your thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, Tommy was playing receiver as a freshman at MSU and running down on special teams and playing a little bit of Wildcat quarterback. And all of a sudden, the Bobcats lost that game to the Grizz, and the next week he was your starting quarterback. And so I just can't count him out. I think he, if you get drafted as opposed to being a free agent, the chance of you making the club go up pretty radically. I think he's going to be the Edelman type who played a quarterback at Kent State and then converted to receiver and had a great career. I think Tommy can do it. I think he will do it. He's just one of those guys. He's a great athlete, and I'm always going to be a little concerned about injuries with the guy because the sophomore, junior seasons he had where he's banged up here and there. But he's just too talented. I can't count him out. I'm rooting for him.
Yeah, I think we all are here on the Big Sky podcast. We're hoping touchdown Tommy keeps the touchdowns rolling for the Raiders. My mom will be pretty stoked about that. Now to move on, my favorite topic of this podcast is talking about my 49ers team. They went ahead and drafted Montana's Junior Bergen. What Kyle Shanahan said is that they expect Bergen to compete for special teams, and that is most likely his only way to get on the roster. Bergen also said during the rookie minicamp that he sees himself as a Hall of Famer, and that's how he views himself. So those are kind of the expectations that the 49ers see, and then what Bergen sees in himself. What do you think about this fit for Bergen landing with the 49ers, Fritz?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean,
me too.
I'm not a Niners fan like somebody in this room is, but his receiving stands aren't spectacular, and it's not really his fault. I thought that offense kind of dragged at times while he was there, and we forget that he had to play running back as a true freshman for the Grizz because everybody else is so banged up. Without knowing how important special teams have been in the 49ers history, having not watched every game like Josh has, if anybody is serious about special teams and making them better, I think you have to take a kid like Bergen. The proof is on YouTube. His stop and start, making that first guy miss and punt return, hitting the seam and kickoff return. There's just not very many people like that at any level. So I think it's a good pick for any team that wanted to improve their special teams, and the Niners got him. Good on them.
John, what are your thoughts before I go on a little rant?
Yeah, well, from what I had seen, it seemed like a lot of the Niners fans that I saw on social media were kind of happy, but also kind of upset. They're happy that the Niners were actually taking special teams seriously and looking for a returner at this time. And I feel like they got one of, if not the best one in the draft. 9 touchdown returns speaks for themselves for Junior, especially he's been able to get it done when it counts with 5 of them coming in the FCS playoffs. So he's definitely stood up when it counts. So we kind of talked about it. This is the only way he's going to make an NFL roster. He's going to have to go out there and be a dynamite returner and find his way through that calling, because I don't think that he's going to make it as a receiver. But yeah, I was kind of surprised to see him actually drafted, not taken as an undrafted free agent. But with 6 picks left in the draft, you can kind of take that flyer, and it secures him for the 49ers for a contract if he doesn't if he does pan out. And if he doesn't pan out, it's pretty easy to either cut him before the season starts or find a trade partner, somebody else who might be looking for a returner. So it definitely kind of works. I think it works great both ways for both the 49ers and for Junior, because it gives him that opportunity that he's looking for.
Yeah, and to kind of touch on what Fritz said, the 49ers, I believe it's the last 3 seasons, have finished either last or in the bottom 3 for special teams. So they definitely made that a priority this offseason. Getting someone like Junior Bergen helps. But the reason why I was so excited about the fit, not only because the last year I've spent studying the Big Sky, so I was excited to see someone that I have followed the last year go to the Niners, but the Niners have a tendency to get these players who kind of play positionless football, whether it's a fullback who's also a tight end, a wide receiver who's also a running back with Debo, who we just lost to the Commanders. And then you have Bergen, who Fritz mentioned was also a running back. So I think he can make it on the team as a special teams specialist, but also there might be some packages for him where it's jet sweeps or he lines up in the backfield just to see what he can do. I think he is that talented. And when you're that talented, you'll find a way onto this roster, especially a roster like the 49ers who struggle in special teams for the last 3 years. So that'll be the end of my rant. We're going to move on. I have a lot more thoughts, but we'll move on to keep the podcast going. Some other notable names that weren't drafted but ended up on teams that I wanted to point out was Efton Chisholm, which was kind of a surprise to me that he wasn't drafted, and Lant Larrison. They both landed on New England. Hayden Harris and Rush Reamer both landed on the Buffalo Bills. And Sebastian Valdez was another player that went to the 49ers. Out of all these players who signed these deals, weren't drafted, but still ended up on teams with contracts, out of all of the ones that I just mentioned or ones that you might have looked into, who do you think is most likely to make the team based off of where they landed, John?
If I have to pick one, it's not really a question. There's two out there that I think definitely will, but the top one I think is Lant Larrison. I think that he's a do-it-all back. He's kind of overlooked in what was a very deep running back class this year, but he's got the ability to carry the ball out of the backfield. He's also got the ability to come out as a receiver. He's got good hands. He doesn't drop the ball. So I think, especially going into a Patriots team that's looking for any depth that they can find, it's a great fit for him, and he'll be able to kind of show out this preseason and find himself a spot on the roster. With that same idea in mind, I think Efton Chisholm also is I wouldn't say a lock to make a roster, but I think he's got a very good shot. He comes in, got the pedigree that of Eastern Washington receivers that Cooper Kupp has kind of made now, and he's got the catches. He's set the records there at Eastern Washington, so it gets his eyes onto him. He's not going to be the high volume guy that he was at Eastern, of course not. That unless he can establish himself very quickly. But as long as he can keep the dependable hands that he had at Eastern Washington, I think he's got a good chance of making the roster with the Patriots as well.
I kind of agree. I think Chisholm has a chance, but I guess I go with Lant Larrison, who I'm been a big fan of, and Rush Reimer. And the thing about Larrison is, he can run it. He can really catch it. Man, he caught a lot of passes. And, he's tough for a $2 steak. This is a rodeo guy. And the only thing I'm bummed about is he didn't go to the Cowboys, because he harkens back to the days when Walt Garrison was running the football for the Cowboys, which is way before you guys' time. But it did happen. And then he did a Skull commercial. So I think Larrison, Cowboys, smokeless tobacco commercial. I guess those days are over too. But Larrison's my guy. And then another guy I wanted to mention and give a shout out to is Cam Scatabo, who 2 years ago was running it for Sac State and really had a great season for ASU and went in the 4th round to the Giants. And I guess my main point there is 2 years ago, 2023, that season, the Big Sky, that league was loaded. Man, there was some talent in that league, and who got out of it was the Grizz and made the title game. So it's great football in our league. And it's too bad someone had to leave, but man, there's some good football.
Yeah, I was going to mention Cam just as a tidbit too, being from ASU, I can't ignore him. And then also Teddy Buchanan, who started his career in the Big Sky as well before ending up on the Bears and then getting drafted in that 4th round. I think Larrison it makes a lot of sense for New England because I think he can kind of play that Danny Woodhead role that they used back in the day where, runs the ball, but it's more of a pass catch specialist. They still have, I still think they have Ramondre Stevenson there, so he does a pretty good job of catching passes. But this Patriots team, like John said, it lacks depth. I'm hoping Chisholm can make it. He's got an Eastern alum, Kendrick Bourne, who is also on that team as a wide receiver. So maybe he can take him under his wing and show him what it takes to come from the Eagles and make it to the league. So I'm curious to see how that works out. I don't know much about Sebastian Valdez to the Niners. So I think with how our draft went, I don't think he really has a shot of making the team. Maybe he makes it as a practice squad member, but I doubt it. But there's some other players we have to highlight who weren't signed to deals, but they were invited to rookie mini camp. One of the players we mentioned was Marcus Ware. He landed on the Seahawks, as well as Brandon Casey. Then Nick Osmo, another player from the Big Sky that went to the Niners. And then Fritz one of his players he mentioned all year last year was Brody Grebe. He landed on the Vikings. Are these just depth pieces, just signees, or is there a couple of players who were invited to these mini camps that we think will make some noise and then make the roster, Fritz?
Well, we mentioned him earlier, but I think Marcus Ware has a decent chance. And, he's been part of two great O lines, or I guess it'd be three for the Bobcats. And, I thought he was going to get drafted. I was a little shocked that he wasn't. As far as the Big Sky's undrafted free agent list, I think he's my best bet. And then, we mentioned Brody Grebe before, a kid from Millstone who played a little bit of Class B football at Roundup and a lot of football for the Bobcats at the end. And, man, he's just a tough kid. So he might be a little undersized, but he's definitely strong enough to make it to that level. The cards are stacked against you when you don't get drafted, but I just think he might be a great fit with the Vikings.
I'd have to agree with Marcus Ware, looking into some of the pre-draft talk again with him. And they had him as kind of like a dependable backup / special teamer. So for him to fall all the way down to, not even just an undrafted free agent, but to just being at camp and it's kind of a pretty big fall. But I definitely feel like he's got the talent to go out there and show it at camp and earn a contract for at least a year. And that worst case end up as a practice squad guy here this year. One of the names that really kind of surprised me that I want to talk about, and I know Josh, you and I did kind of talk about it a little bit when it got announced, but it was Nick Osmo going to the 49ers. I'm just interested with that one as to whether or not maybe they're going to look into him as kind of like a use check style guy, maybe try to turn him into a fullback, because I don't see him as an NFL running back. I wonder if they're maybe going to try to see if he'd want to bulk up and work towards that fullback aspect, because I know I've heard a lot of teams starting to bring back that fullback idea.
Yeah, no, that when you mentioned that, I kind of was shocked because when he got signed, I just looked at it as the running backs always find these hidden gems, running backs that they invite or sign to deals who end up being great players. But when you mentioned him switching over to fullback, it just made a lot of sense. Juice just signed a 2-year deal, so he's only going to be with the Niners for a couple more years. And if Osmo is a big bruising guy, and if he can put on some extra pounds and then still keep his athleticism, he kind of fits that role that Juice doesn't. So I'm curious to see if that works. But I do agree with the 49ers running back room. That's the only way he's making this team, is if he's going to possibly play a different position. He's not going to crack the running backs on the Niners unless he does, in my opinion. But I also agree with you guys with Marcus Ware, especially where he landed on the Seahawks. The Seahawks notoriously do not draft O linemen, or they don't draft them well. So I think with him just landing on that team, I think he can end up making it at least as a swing lineman and go from there. But I think he does have the talent to make that roster. I'm curious to see what happens over there in Seattle. But yeah, a lot of Niners are a lot of Big Sky players ended up on the Niners, so I'm curious to see how that shakes out. But some other players we have to talk about that weren't in the NFL draft was the CFL draft. There was a possible rumor going around that Keelan White from Montana, wide receiver, could be taken first overall. He ended up going third. And then also, who else? Hayden Harris went 11th overall. Now, I do want to talk about this because Harris also had that invite from the Buffalo Bills. Do you think he sticks with that, or does he go to the BC Lions? And then what do you think of where White landed, John?
I definitely feel like with Hayden Harris, it's kind of like having the rights to a player in a different league. Well, it is exactly that. But you're gonna take the shot. You're gonna take the shot at the high level. If a guy's signed to the MLB but also gets looked at by the Japanese league, he's gonna want to go to the show first, and then if that doesn't pan out, then he's gonna go elsewhere. So Hayden Harris is 100% gonna stick it out in Buffalo as long as they'll have him there. But it's nice for him to have that fallback with the BC Lions and that Canadian citizenship to be able to be drafted there. Canadian Football League's a great league. There's a lot of Big Sky success inside of it. So it definitely is nice to kind of have that track record and fallback for him. As for Keelan White, I do think that he will find himself into a good spot in Ottawa. didn't quite get the Dave Dickinson Montana tie back with that, with Calgary having the number 1 overall pick. But yeah, it's a good spot for him. Canadian Football League's a little different. You got the 12 players per side, so there's an extra wide receiver out there at times, or extra personnel. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of find a spot on the field. He's a great receiver, good hands, so I think he'll excel out there in Canada.
I'm kind of excited to see how Hayden Harris approaches things. CFL training camps are going on right now, if I read things right. So maybe he gets a little of a grace period to see how the NFL goes. But I kind of get the feeling he might wind up starting in the CFL, and then it could turn into something great. Bobcats had a guy named Alex Singleton who spent several seasons in the CFL and became an All-Pro with the Eagles and was really playing well for the Broncos before he got hurt last season. So there's definitely some path either way, whether he goes straight in with the Bills, somehow catches on with them, or he starts in the CFL and comes back. As far as Keelan White, there's a long line of Big Sky skill kids who make hay up in the CFL. And one of the first 2 that ever happened were out of Montana. Mike Trevathan and Matt Clark both played receiver for the Grizz at the same time and both excelled in the CFL. And that's going back, again, before your time, it's during my time. But, I think the CFL is a great starting spot, and sometimes it's a great place to finish too. But somebody like Alex Singleton, I could see Hayden Harris following that same path.
Yeah, a lot of good points you guys made. That is going to wrap up everything. That was kind of our draft recap for the Big Sky Now Football podcast. It is getting ready to start summer, so during that summertime, we'll have a lot more news that's coming out once rosters and camp invites are all settled and everything like that goes on. But I want to thank Fritz and Jon for joining me as always. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. We'll see you all next time on another episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. Take care.